Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar sponsored by Savvly, your personal pension designed to provide lifelong financial security and peace of mind. I'm here with Karen Andres, the Director of Inclusive Saving and Investing at the Aspen Institute Financial Security Program. Karen, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first tell me about like the Aspen Institute. Tell me about,
Sure.
just kind of brief me on where you're coming from and what experience you're bringing into this conversation.
Sure, absolutely. So the Aspen Institute is it's a nonprofit organization founded in Aspen, Colorado, thus the pretty background, but headquartered in Washington, D.C. And broadly speaking, we seek to support leaders who are bringing about a free, just, and equitable society, and across many aspects of American life and globally. We have international affiliates as well. The area that I work in is the financial security program. And so we're a policy program, meaning that we sort of interface with mostly federal policy, but also state level policy, and bring all the right players to the table from the private sector, from the nonprofit sector, across political ideologies to find the best solutions for the challenges facing American households and their finances. So writ large, we're trying to bring about a society with more widely shared prosperity. Um, Obviously, for your listeners, the retirement saving system and the access that they provide to capital markets is an essential part of the American household balance sheet. And we seek to make that system more accessible and more effective for everybody, no matter what set of household financial constraints or parameters they're bringing to the table. And I'll just say on a personal note, I started my career in the 401k world an unspecified number of years ago as a financial educator in the 401k system. I was a 401k educator all over America in factories and slaughterhouses and hotels and also doctor's offices and fashion design houses. And I was doing 401k education in Spanish mostly, and learned a lot about people's financial challenges that they bring to retirement savings. Um, what they do and don't need from us, what is going to be effective, but mostly just a sense that, like, gosh, it really wouldn't take that much to make this system work better for everybody. It's sort of right in our hands. So it's a sense of optimism fundamentally that I bring to this work and to this conversation.
So that's interesting because a lot of people I've spoken to aren't necessarily optimistic. A lot of Americans right now aren't necessarily optimistic. So
Sure.
really, let's talk about that. There are a couple of key points you talked about. One is what are the challenges people are facing, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
what do they not need? And I would love to hear on each.
Yeah. Right. Oh my gosh, you could spend the entire time with those two questions. um, I think, and as a, I live in Michigan, a swing state, and I would say that it's pretty clear based on the results of the last election that people are feeling pain in their finances, right? They are, and they have been for some time. And I think we've been a little led astray by looking at specific measures of our economy, or at only the CPI as a measure of cost increases. I think we've known for a long time that the cost of life's big ticket items, your housing, your higher education, your dependent care, your health care, have gone up at a pretty rapid clip while wages have stayed flat in real terms for most Americans. And um, and that truth has been disguised by a lot of other metrics and data, like the stock market is at record highs, great, or real estate is more valuable than ever, and so people look wealthier on paper. Great, right. We had a pandemic and that sort of scrambled a lot of the radio signals. But I think what's true is that people just don't have enough slack in their cash flow. Um, and then that makes it impossible to participate effectively in workplace in saving and investing, or retail saving and investing, or even to build up those emergency savings. We've all heard the stat about, it goes up and down, but roughly, 40% of Americans don't have $400. Hi, Kitty.
This is my cat Socrates. I rescued him when he was 2 weeks old. So he
2 weeks. Oh, I love the name, Socrates. Um, I think that we can all see that this is not a strong, Americans are not on a strong financial foundation. Um, I think what, and I'll just put in a plug really quickly. The best data I've seen on this, or the best representation of this, um, comes from the American Compass Institute, Oren Cass's outfit. I just have to put in a plug. I love the Cost of Thriving Index that they published. Does such a beautiful job of bringing to life how this has changed over the past 40 or 50 years, and what financial life in America really looks like for people. Um, I think what they don't need is to be told to stop complaining. First of all, I think they don't need to be told like, well, but inflation as measured by the CPI, inflation has been low for such a long time. So why are you complaining about the price of eggs? It's like it's not the eggs, it's the rent, right? And it has been the rent. Um, I think they don't need to be lectured about budgeting or I think, financial education, literacy capability. Like, I think people need specific information at the right times. I think I don't know that we can financially educate our way out of an economy that is paying people in flat wages while the costs of these big ticket items they're unavoidable. You can't not have rent. You can't not. Are you asking people to choose to not pay for childcare, right? Like, I think that I think we need to just be a little more humble in the way that we listen to the pain people are feeling and meet their challenges with real solutions, even if that requires, tough policy conversations or tough conversations about innovation and profit.
okay. So what can we do as citizens,
Hmm.
both in terms of, you know, to some extent greater societal stuff, but especially in terms of our own personal responsibility, right? I don't necessarily want to um, get into a state of lecturing, but providing
Yeah,
resources
that's right.
or
That's right.
for like how can we empower ourselves to deal with the challenges that are present?
Yeah. Well, I think a few things, and I'll put it in the retirement savings context, right? So some doable things that our sort of corner of financial services can do. We know that only half of private sector workers even have access to workplace investing. Um, we should fix that. There are lots of ways to fix that. 57 million Americans don't have access to retirement savings at work. So whether that's through state facilitated plans, whether that's through additional tax incentives and nudges at the federal level, if there's going to be a secure three, who knows? Um, and then there are other ways to go about this. I think to go about ensuring that everybody has access to a way to save at work. I think the other thing we can do, a form of sort of listening that we can do, is say, we know that a lot of people, to the conversation earlier, struggle to have emergency savings put aside to tap into. It's really expensive to tap into a 401k when the furnace breaks, right? Or when you need to replace a tire. Usually comes with a 10% penalty and a tax hit right out the gate. Let's give them access to cheaper savings, right? So in the workplace, why don't we pair kind of like the French fries to the hamburger? Should we ever be offering a 401k without some form of cheap, accessible liquidity, whether it's emergency savings or something else to go with a retirement savings plan? So, I think we can respond to the pain people are feeling by giving them a better mousetrap. We can give them a better set of tools, and some of that is private market innovation. And you see that, right? There are glimmers of innovation happening, especially in emergency savings, in employee hardship funds, payroll lending. Like, there's a whole world of liquidity solutions that we could be offering. And then policy can help us scale those solutions. So in the case of emergency savings, something that in partnership with many other organizations, we would like to see people automatically enrolled into emergency savings, just like increasingly people are automatically enrolled into their retirement savings. And there are some policy fixes that need to happen, both in ERISA world, but also in banking regulations, to ensure that all forms of workplace emergency savings are eligible for automatic enrollment. So again, it's People want resources, and information. They also want tools. And we shouldn't pretend that we've even made those tools fully accessible to everybody, or that we've designed them to really work well, but we can, right? These are doable things.
Is that where your source of optimism comes from?
Yeah, that we know what to do, right? That the optimism is that like it's not like we don't have to throw up our hands and say like, oh my goodness, how on earth could we ever ensure that everybody in America has access to an inclusive retirement savings system? We actually have a lot of tools that we could use. Um, we just need to use them.
Okay. So if, while we wait for policymakers to catch up, right? How can people
Well, it's
assemble?
our job to help them catch up. I don't think we
Sure, sure.
wait. We don't
Okay.
wait.
Okay.
That's what, and
Okay.
that's what we do, right?
Okay.
We
Fair,
help
fair,
bring
fair.
all the people who know, who have the data, the insights. You've worked with a couple of employers, you hear from employees. If you have the data, we set the table and help policymakers understand faster, right?
Mhm.
I think something that I've learned in my time at the Aspen Institute is that there are so many terrific, smart people working in government on the Hill, within agencies, but they have huge portfolios, huge portfolios. If you talk any given staffer for like, let's just say a senator, they're like, sure, I'm working on pensions. Also, I'm working on energy policy. Also, I'm working on housing policy. Also, like, counterterrorism. It's an enormous portfolio. And so the more that we all can do, I think our responsibility is to package and serve up in really digestible ways the best of what we know and the solutions we think that will work. We can help accelerate this process. It's not just the politics, right? There's real substantive like support and partnership that can help bring these changes about faster.
Okay, great. So and that's fantastic, right? Anything we can do to speed up the process, for sure.
That's right.
So for our listeners then, right?
Yeah,
Let's say we're thinking about some listeners who maybe being involved in the nitty-gritty of policy is just not something that's going to be
sure.
of their lives. Um, what can they do to help create their own toolbox, given that the pre-made tools that would be ideal aren't available?
Do you mean in sort of in their own financial lives?
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, I mean, America, America has a wealth of something like 19% of our GDP comes from the financial services sector. We have a very well developed financial services sector. We're a highly financialized society. There's no shortage of tools, products, options, right? What we know is that it's usually human behavior that's the hardest thing to get over. These products, whether it's banking tools, savings tools, et cetera, um, they've gotten better and better and better in terms of the UX, ease of use. I think the private sector has done a tremendous job at leveraging technology to make these experiences seem as easy and approachable as possible. It's always improvement, but it's a vast improvement even in 20 years, especially in the retirement savings space. So I think the biggest challenge is that people face is their own sort of humanness and inertia. And that's why I think whether it's in the retail banking sector, whether it's in investing, whether in a retail or institutional context, um, that's why there's such a focus on automation. And we see this globally, right? People shouldn't have to make 1,000 different financial decisions just to exist in the world.
hmm sure.
Other countries have done a better job at automating some of this, and I think that's where we need to go from a policy perspective. But I think from an individual perspective, I think there's no shortage of tools out there for the folks who are really deeply engaged, sort of in their finances. I'm curious, is there a specific use case that you have in mind, Sean?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I can come up with one, right? Because I'm just thinking about somebody who might be following this, right? And obviously, somebody who's watching this is going to be a lot more
Right,
financially
they're already right. There's a self-selected group,
right.
right?
Yeah, they're self-selected, right? So I
Yeah,
get what you're saying. Like, hey, listen, like, people who aren't watching this, like, there's got
right,
to be more automation. We're not going to get better results by getting everybody to be maximally financially engaged.
right,
It's just not.
right.
I understand that's not realistic, and I totally get where you're coming from there. That said, the people who are watching this are likely to be more financially engaged. So let's say you take a couple, they're married, they're in their mid 30s, right? And they want to make sure that they have a healthy retirement. And they know that they might live a long time.
Yeah.
They know they might have to deal with end of life expenses.
Yeah.
They know, for example, right, you may have one spouse live significantly longer than the other. So you may have the main breadwinner, not depending, they may retire. There are all kinds of things that can happen. How do they make sure that they have a healthy retirement, dealing with the fact that, they're probably
Yeah.
paying their bit on their either rent or their mortgage. They're worried about end of life care expenses. They may have children that they're going to put through university. What can
Yeah.
do to maximize their odds?
I mean, it's the stock personal finance answer, but you need to be saving and investing from the minute you first earn money, if you have any extra cash flow, and make sure it's invested aggressively. And I mean, in retirement accounts, an IRA, if you don't have access to a workplace plan, a 529 for your kids, if you have an HSA available to you, I mean, use any and all of the tools and then invest it aggressively so that you can reap as much benefit. Because you're right, longevity is increasing rapidly, careers are long. I would say something that we're, given the rapid churn in the labor market, I think the average, I don't know if it's the average or the median, but basically every 2 years, that's Gen Z's churn. They're changing jobs, and that there's a lot that's lost in job change. Even if, let's say, you participate in a workplace retirement savings plan, and you've got that money, you've done what I just said, right? Like maybe you were auto enrolled in, or maybe it was opt in, but you're saving right in the target date fund that's appropriate for your age. Maybe you even went more aggressive, whatever. Um, every time you change jobs, not only is there the risk that, you know, if you don't have a sufficient balance built up, uh, you end up cashing it out because it just seems easier, right? We know that the rollover process is very cumbersome and difficult, and so a lot of people do end up just say, whatever, just cash it out, right? Which of course is a mistake if your goal is long-term asset accumulation. But the other thing that doesn't happen often, and Vanguard just published some data on this, is that when you go to your new job, sometimes your deferral rate at your next 401k or workplace plan is often different. And so you're saving in these really like lumpy ways because every plan is different, right? So maybe you were saving at 5% at your old job, and then you get auto enrolled at 3% at your new job, even though ostensibly your salary is the same or higher. Otherwise, why would you move jobs, right? So you got this really lumpy deferral, like a savings rate situation happening. And so it's incumbent upon the saver, the person who's changing jobs every 2 years, to make sure that you're keeping that consistent across. Like you should be having an eye on, like, even if you're automatically enrolled, wait, am I automatically enrolled at the same rate that I was at my previous job? Because otherwise, you're not going to be on that same savings trajectory that you thought you were on. There may be long-term fixes for this systemically, but in the meantime, that is going to be, it's one more thing that we've pushed on to the worker to figure out. So I'm just flagging that as a risk that is going to be more salient for that couple in their 30s, who I think are Gen Z, or maybe not. I don't know. Are they
I
Generation
think
Z?
they'd be millennials.
The millennials. Okay, I'm an elder millennial, so I don't know. I'm right on that line of X and millennial.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the millennial cutoff is 89, which would put it at like 35 would be like the youngest millennials.
okay, okay, but so they're right on the edge, right? Just like
Yeah, right.
me, right on the
Yeah.
edge. And I think that the that generation, as your hypothetical couple in their 30s, as they're looking out to old age and the money they will need then, need to keep in mind that all the little calculators they're using do depend upon a consistent rate of saving, and job change may get in the way of that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask what you meant by deferral rate, just, but then you ended up defining it for everybody. So this is where you were talking about automation, and we want to have more automation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But now you're saying, hey, listen, the automation that we have is
right.
kind of not necessarily the ideal automation. Like you have to kind of watch what's happening because you might end up being enrolled in the automation and it's not being the same thing and it's
Yeah,
some
that's
different.
right. The other thing, and I love this report from Vanguard. I'm going to cite it again, but uh, when let's say this couple, let's give her a name. Let's say her name is I don't know, Sarah. So Sarah works at a place for a couple years, builds up a balance. Let's say it's 10 grand. I don't know. And in an employer match, maybe it's a super generous matching policy, and so she's immediately vested. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to be right on top of this. I'm going to take this money and I'm going to roll it into an IRA, put it in a rollover IRA at wherever she invests. And she rolls that money from her 401k into her IRA. And guess what it does? It sits there in a money market or something because there's no default investment option for an IRA. Should there be? Probably. So again, we think about long-term balance accumulation. Here she's been in a target date fund at her old employer, and she rolls it out. And invariably, the paperwork is such a hassle that she's like, oh God, whatever, just get it into the IRA and I'll figure out later. But later turns into 6 months, turns into a year, no market gains, right? Unless she actively made that choice. Could we provide a default experience for her when she goes into the role? There's automation opportunities in all parts of this process. For the moment, it's on Sarah to make sure that her money, she stays saving at the same rate if she can afford it, that she stays invested in this, no matter where her money actually sits. These are little pitfalls, right, that are sort of built in. It's easy to slip through the cracks in this system because it's such a patchwork quilt of different employers and different financial services providers.
Yeah, so it sounds like when you have job transitions and there's some kind
Yeah.
of over transfer, that's really when the biggest risk of slipping through the cracks occurs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's some enormous amount of money that leaks. Like, and the biggest risk is cash out, right? Which may be the right choice for someone, right? A lot of costs happen at job change. Sometimes people don't always leave jobs voluntarily, and sometimes they need that money to live on, right? And so this is it's not a judgment of how people use the money. It's just factually, again, in our scenario, if your goal is to accumulate money over a lifetime, you need that money to stay invested and to stay in whatever tax advantaged vehicle that it was in. So yeah, there's a lot that can happen at job change. A lot of, we call it leakage, that money that sort of leaks out of the system at job change. And there are some really cool efforts underway from policy and market to help automate that whole system, right? We call it auto portability. What if Sarah didn't have to do anything? What if her 401k just followed her, right? How cool would that be? Guess what? That's being built.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So if people want to participate in that, what should they be looking for when that comes down the pipe? Because I'm sure that's new stuff is always interesting for people to get involved with.
It
What?
is. So the effort is called, it's the Portability Services Network. And it's a voluntary network of record keepers. The record keepers are the financial services firm that you log into to see your 401k, right? So this is TIAA and Vanguard and Empower, right? And that's been a consolidating industry for the past several years. And so there aren't that many of them. There used to be a zillion of them. They've been consolidating and growing. And so if we get enough of those record keepers to join the network, it will become easier, right? Become more likely that the job you go to next would be able to easily accept your savings from your old employer. It's very much still in process. But it's really been tremendous work and innovation on the part of the folks who've been leading it. Again, keeping in mind that only half, employers aren't required to offer a plan in America, unlike other countries. And it's also possible that you have a job that did have a plan. Maybe Sarah goes to an employer that doesn't have one. And so then she's on her own to figure out and prioritize retirement savings on her own at a different institution, right? So again, keeping in mind the perspective here that our first job is to make sure that everybody has access to retirement savings in the workplace.
Okay. So is there a way that people can find out whether an employer is participating in this portability services network or
I
not?
think so. I'm not an expert on this. I would encourage you to reach out to the Portability Services Network. They could check with their employer to see if that's an option. But I would inquire with the folks at the Portability Services Network about how people can engage in this as it's being built.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. Well, if any of our listeners are interested, then they can go and check that out. Are there any other interesting projects or resources that you'd like to share that people should be paying attention to?
Oh, good question. Well, I've already mentioned liquidity, right? And how important that is, meaning access to cash in an emergency that can help prevent withdrawals from the 401k plan, or 403b, whatever defined contribution plan that you have. Um, Portability, obviously, a big issue. I'll say that something else we have our eye on is a sort of on the DL set of provisions from the Secure 2.0 Act, about something called the Savers Match. So there used to be a tax credit called the Savers Credit, that lower income savers, people who were saving money, were eligible to receive at tax time, in the form of a tax credit. And in Secure 2, the retirement industry looked at that and said, you know what? We've got a better idea. Let's take that money and redesign it so that it functions as a match, a savings match for retirement savings for lower income savers in America. And so there's effectively, they wrote these provisions. It passed as part of Secure 2.0, and starting in 2027, if everything goes to plan, lower income savers will have the ability to get up to $1,000 if for single filers, or up to $2,000 for joint filers, in match dollars from the federal government, if they're saving in a tax advantage retirement savings account. Um, there's a lot to do to operationalize, like literally, how do we move the money from Treasury into people's retirement savings accounts? It's actually trickier than you'd think for like financial plumbing reasons, infrastructure reasons. But there's a pretty big effort underway to make sure that the people who were already, that lower income households who are saving, finding it in their budgets and in their priority set to save for retirement, they are able to access this cash. And then also a broader effort, to think about, how do we expand this? How do we push up the income threshold so more people can benefit from this saving incentive? So again, that's not till 2027, but there's lots of work underway by the private sector, by policy types, to make sure that this policy comes to life, and we can see what happens when we offer a savings incentive. Because as you can imagine, right, getting that money into accounts, you can only capital markets only work if there's money in the account to work on. And so we want to make sure that everybody has not only access to an account, ideally in the workplace, but if not, we'll take retail. But there are extra sources of funds to go into those accounts for lower income workers. So that's an exciting effort, that I think, back to where we started this conversation, demonstrates like we actually know what to do, right? We actually know the process of building up savings via investing is not a mystery. We just need everybody to have an account and get some money into it, ideally on the sooner side.
Okay, cool, 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 cool. Well, any before we close out, is there anything else that you want to share? Anything that I might have missed that you think would have been good to ask about? Any final notes for our listeners?
I'll say this, and I've talked with Dario about this multiple times. I think it's clear that there is a spending problem, right? That the people who are lucky enough to get to, I hate to even say retirement, but to some age, some point in time, when they need to or want to reduce their labor income, and they have some amount of savings, and how to convert that into money that they feel good spending, right? Lots of evidence to suggest that a lot of people are like underspending because it feels bad, right? Humans, it feels bad to spend a pile of money. Oh, for a lot of people. There are some among us who feel great about that. But most of us are like, oh my God, I worked my whole life to build up some savings. What do I'm just gonna supposed to go spend it now? And so it's hard for people to do. And of course, there's the longevity risk for most people, because most people have not built up a pile of savings big enough. And so how do we use risk pooling or other tools to ensure that people can get steady, guaranteed income throughout their lifetime. This is clearly an essential need. And and I think it's important for us to do a lot of listening and exploring with people, even those with small balances, what are their goals for the money, right? Because a lot of people place a high emotional value on the ability to pass it to their children, right? Or they really want to finally pay off the mortgage, or it's important to them that they contribute to their grandkids' education, right? And that may weigh more for them, may weigh more heavily for them than an extra $75 a month in income, for example. And I think that we are at the beginning of being able to ask the questions and understand, maybe it's a segmentation issue, right? Maybe it's helping people, giving people a, a set of limited options when it comes to how much of their income or how much of their savings balance to convert into income. But I want to make sure that we keep this, we keep the person and their, not only the mathematics of their financial life, but also the emotion of their financial life at the center of what we design here. Again, not, it's certainly, we people need tools to turn a balance into income, no doubt. I think we should be really thoughtful about the options that we provide to people and what we do or don't default them into.
Sure, sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting, you've talked a lot about automation and automatic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody who has been an investment advisor representative, it's interesting to note that we don't have much as far as like automatics for longevity protection, except
Yeah.
the only option is annuities, right?
And
And,
Social Security.
yeah, well, yeah, so Social Security, which is very often not sufficient for, you know,
Never, I mean, it never is, right?
um,
It's essential. It's essential, but it's not sufficient on its own.
right. So for somebody who is, has a lifestyle that's meaningfully above that, right? The only option seems to be annuities and very,
Right.
a lot of different permutations of that product. But there is no automatic route into it. Once you,
No. Oh no. Yeah.
and then it becomes automatic. But there really isn't an automated or
Right.
regular or scheduled discussion about longevity risk. And so
Yeah.
many people, it's not even on their radar. They're not
No.
thinking about it.
Well, and people, I mean, not only is it not on their radar, I think the research shows that people are usually wrong about how long they're going to live. They
Oh,
think they're going to die much sooner than they actually do. Um,
well, it can go both ways.
especially with women, right? So women, we're like living
Yeah,
for
yeah.
a very long period of time. But like, I think, I mean, and who can predict when they're going to die? No one, right? Of
Right.
course. But I think that, I mean, in the same way that it feels bad to take a pile of money and then start spending it down, it feels really bad to take your pile of money and then hand it over to someone else and then have them say, you know what? You give me this entire balance and I'm just going to like give it back to you a chunk at a time. And we all know, those of us in this field, like, yes, but the guarantee, yes, but the risk protection, of course. But again, humans. So if it doesn't, this is, it start feel, I think my hypothesis is that feelings really start to matter in material ways when you get, let's say, in the final third of life, in ways that they didn't as much when you were 20 or you're 30, right? But now it really starts to matter. You start your life, the weight you place on different aspects of a decision, they might change. And so I think that, to your point, yes, we automating the accumulation side is very different than automating the decumulation or the spending side. They're not the same.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, and the decumulation, I think, there's less automation there on the decumulation side.
Well, yeah, I mean, currently there's no automation. I think there could be, or you could automate a decision flow, right?
Right,
Maybe
right.
AI is going to help us here, right? Like
AI could be very helpful. We'll see. I don't know.
AI could be helpful, maybe, right? On the helping automate the generation of recommendations for somebody, given how they answer certain questions. It's almost like, you know, back when I had my Series 7 and 63, is all about the risk tolerance quiz, right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
that was
yeah. I
right.
designed one
Remember?
of those for our clients. I designed their
Right?
quiz. Yeah, yeah,
Always had to have the right.
yeah,
Got to
yeah.
have the risk. Well, first, let's talk about your risk tolerance, your time horizon, your risk tolerance. But like, there's almost an emotional version of that risk tolerance quiz that is important in the decumulation conversation. It's less risk tolerance and it's more, I'm not, emotion may not be the right word, but it's feelings. It's how you feel about how you're using your money that should guide some of the decumulation portions.
So, are you familiar with the DISC psychometric?
Yes, yes.
So I love the DISC psychometric. I use it in various things. But I could see somebody taking a DISC and taking, maybe a little bit of a more personalized risk tolerance or financial, like all those kinds of things, right? And take
Right.
all of that information. So based on their psychometrics, based on their time, all these things, plugging it into a system and then automating the recommendations of their accumulation and decumulation over the course of their
See,
life.
couldn't you imagine
Wouldn't that be cool?
an AI? So, okay, so I mean,
I
what's a
could
good
build this.
analog here? You could build so here's, you know what it is? I don't know if you've seen Shlomo Benartzi's his flow, his suggested flow. I saw him present this a few years ago at the DeCia Academic Forum in New York. And it was just like, he said, let me show you a sequence of slides that are just like a prototype of a decision flow around this question of income, right? And the scenario was like somebody, I think it was somebody in the pre-retirement phase, so 55 to 65. I forget what the balance was. It wasn't huge, right? This wasn't like a wealthy person, right? This is like somebody who's been like slow and steady. Maybe they saved up like, I don't know, a couple $100,000 over a whole career, right? And so it took into account multiple, my memory of it is it took multiple things into account. So it was asking like, obviously, like, what are your essential expenses you're trying to cover in retirement? It was about social security, like the size, and it was like it assumed that it would suck in social security data, that we get to a point in the future where you could pull in the amount of your social security check. And then it also asked, what are your goals around bequest? How much of this balance do you want to leave to someone for some purpose, right? And so it took in these just it was simple. It wasn't like tell me everything that's ever been true about your financial life. It was like these three major sources of information. What if you layered into that what you're saying, which is like the psychometric or my feelings tolerance, whatever, maybe the same thing, right? If you layered that in to a more personal, and it spits out like a recommendation. It's like, well, given how you answered this question, this is how much you should annuitize, right? This is when you should claim Social Security. And this is the amount of money, and this is what you should do with it to protect it that you want to leave to somebody in your life.
Even earlier, like how much do you save, right? This is how much.
Yeah.
This is
And here's how much you should hold aside because guess what? Your car is going to be repaired when you're 71 just like it does when you're 41, or the furnace or the roof, whatever. It's still going to be a problem, so you're going to have some savings on the side. But the point is that it acknowledges these are all deeply connected decisions. Nobody's making a decision about retirement income without also making a social security claiming decision, right? Like it's the same decision. It's just you have to make them sort of in concert with each other. Couldn't you imagine a tool that would pull all these things in for us?
I
Is
could
that
probably build one.
crazy? I think you should. I think you should build it. I think we need to see it. And if you do it with tech, then you can like deliver it to everybody, right? To the masses.
Yeah, that's got me thinking. That's really fascinating to end on. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Please go forth, build this thing that the world needs, and we can figure out how to, it's all about the balance, right? Strike that balance for people.
Yep. Cool, cool. Well, thank you, Karen. I
Of
appreciate
course.
you coming on today. It was a wonderful discussion. Uh,
Nice to meet you.
yeah, nice to meet you. Thank you, everyone, for watching this webinar sponsored by Savvly, your personal pension designed to provide lifelong financial security and peace of mind. Have a wonderful day.